Have you ever watched the sky turn against you? Not in a movie, not on the news, but truly, watch the heavens shift into something unfamiliar, something that doesn't belong? What would you do if the sun began to vanish in the middle of the day? What if the birds stopped singing, the wind froze still, and the light, sweet and golden just a moment ago, turned into a shadow crawling across the land? Would you pray? Would you run? Or would you stare, paralyzed, wondering if this was the end? Centuries ago, people didn't ask questions like, is this a solar eclipse? They didn't have the words. They had only fear. The sky was their calendar, their compass, their God. And when it betrayed them, when the moon swallowed the sun or bled red in the dark, they didn't feel awe. They felt terror. This isn't just about astronomy. This is about belief, survival, and the ancient pulse of dread that still beats in us today. Because when the light disappears, something deep inside us wakes up. In the medieval world, that feeling wasn't just superstition, it was prophecy. So tonight, let me take you back to a time when science hadn't yet touched the stars, to a night when the moon turned to blood, and every man, woman, and child believed that the end had come. Part 1. When the sky went dark. It was supposed to be just another day. The year was 1234. Or maybe it was 1190. No one really kept track unless they were a monk or a noble. But for the people in the village, woodcutters, shepherds, blacksmiths, women spinning wool by the fire, it was the season of planting. The days were growing longer. The snow had melted. Children were barefoot in the fields again, and there was a feeling, just barely, that the land had forgiven them for winter. And then, the light began to die. Not like dusk, not slowly, not with color, but suddenly, sharply. One moment, the sun was overhead, warming the thatched rooftops, throwing golden streaks across the barley. The next, it dimmed, as if some unseen hand had placed a veil across the heavens. At first, no one spoke. The birds went quiet. The dogs in the street stopped barking. A child dropped her pail of water and stared upward, mouth open. An old man crossed himself and whispered, "Christ have mercy." The shadows changed shape. The sky turned an eerie, metallic gray. And then, as if from the edges inward, the sun vanished. Gone. The world was not ready for that silence. In the Middle Ages, there were no weather forecasts, no telescopes, no scientists to explain it. The heavens were the dwelling place of angels and saints. The stars were thought to be holes in the sky, windows to the divine. And the sun, it was life itself. So when it disappeared in the middle of the day, panic spread like fire through dry grass. Some fell to their knees in prayer. Others screamed and ran to the church, pounding on the heavy doors, begging the priest to come out and bless the earth. But the priest was inside, praying just as hard. There were whispers in Latin, psalms recited in trembling voices. In some villages, people gathered whatever candles they had and lit them as offerings. In others, they beat drums and rang bells, hoping the noise would drive the darkness away. Because surely, they believed, this was no natural thing. It was a punishment, a curse, a sign of the wrath of heaven. Maybe someone had sinned. Maybe the whole village had. Maybe the devil was loose. Some mothers covered their babies' eyes. Midwives warned pregnant women not to look at the sky, lest their child be born cursed. And somewhere, in the far corner of the village, a blind woman, older than anyone remembered, rocked back and forth and whispered, "It has come again." Just like before. No one knew what she meant. But no one asked. The eclipse passed, as eclipses do. The veil lifted. The sun returned. The birds sang again. The wind moved. But the village was not the same. For days, people walked more quietly. The fields felt colder. And the church pews were full each morning with people who hadn't been inside in years. Because something had happened. They had seen the sky break. And deep down, even the boldest of them wondered, what if it happens again? What if next time, the light doesn't come back? But even after the sun returned, it wasn't over. Not really. Because fear like that doesn't just leave. It lingers. Like smoke after a fire. like a bad dream that follows you into the morning. And in the days that followed, stories began to spread. In the tavern, someone swore he saw a rider cloaked in black galloping through the trees just as the sky darkened. In the market square, a widow whispered that the cows gave no milk that morning, and that her rooster, who always crowed before dawn, had gone completely silent. A child came down with fever. A storm toppled part of the abbey roof. 2 ravens were seen circling the church steeple at dusk. All of it, they believed, tied to the eclipse. Nothing was just coincidence. Everything had meaning, because the world, to them, was not mechanical. It was mystical, and when the sky changed, it meant the world was changing too. In hushed corners of candlelit homes, old tales were told again of the serpent that tries to swallow the sun, of the angel who turns his face away from mankind, of the day of judgment creeping closer. One man said he remembered an eclipse like this when he was a boy, right before a plague swept through the valley. Another said he had seen a wolf-shaped cloud drift across the darkened sun, and took it as a sign that war was coming. But no one spoke too loud, because fear made them careful, reverent, suspicious. And what made it worse was this: they had no answers. Even the priests could only offer scripture, fragments of prophecy, warnings from Revelation. The sun shall be darkened, and the stars shall fall from heaven. But they could not say when, or why, or how to stop it. So the people did what people always do when they're afraid of what they can't control. They looked for someone to blame. Some said a woman in the next village was a witch, that she'd been seen walking through the woods barefoot the night before the sky went dark, that her eyes didn't reflect firelight, that her breath steamed even in warm air. No proof, of course, but enough fear can turn suspicion into truth. She was found 2 nights later, bound and thrown into the river. They said if she floated, she was guilty. She did not float. And yet, the fear remained, because even after the offering was made, even after the prayers were whispered and the candles burned low, the memory of the darkness stayed with them, somewhere, deep in the bones. A reminder that the sky could turn at any moment, and that when it does, no one is safe. Not the king in his castle, not the child in her cradle, no one. But fear doesn't live alone. Where fear grows, imagination follows. And so, as the days crept on, longer, but not warmer, the villagers began to dream strange dreams. Dreams of fire in the sky, of oceans boiling, of horned beasts standing in the fields, unmoving, their eyes glowing like coals. Children woke crying, unable to explain. Dogs howled at nothing. Horses bucked without reason. And at night, the moon began to rise red. Not every night, just once. But once was enough. It wasn't a red like sunset, soft and golden. It was deep, rust-colored, like old blood, like something ancient had stained the moon from within. And this was not something they could explain away. Even those who said nothing during the eclipse now stared at the red moon with trembling lips. Because the sun could hide, but it always came back. The moon, though, the moon had turned. Some said it was a warning. Others said it was a wound. A few whispered that it was the eye of something watching. Whatever it was, they didn't speak of it in the open. Not after what happened to the old healer near the woods. She had lived alone for years. Midwife, herbwoman, keeper of strange bones and dried flowers. People used to come to her quietly for teas and salves. But when the moon turned red, someone claimed they saw her standing in her doorway, arms lifted to the sky, speaking words no one recognized. By morning, her home was gone, burned to ash. No one claimed it. No one had to. In the ashes, they found a bundle of herbs tied with red thread and a circle of stones blackened but untouched by flame. The priest said nothing, only sprinkled holy water on the earth and muttered, "God sees. God knows." But that night, he locked his doors from the inside and slept with a candle burning at his feet. The fear was no longer passing. It had settled in, thick as fog, the kind you don't walk through, the kind that watches you back. People no longer asked if the moon would turn again. They asked when and what would happen then. Part 2. The blood moon rises. It returned on the 7th night. No warning, no wind, no sound, just a sky that turned strange. It had been an unusually still day, no birds in the trees, no breeze through the wheat. Even the river that usually chattered over stones ran quiet and low, as if it too were holding its breath. By dusk, the air felt thick. People shut their windows early. Children were kept indoors. Fires were lit in hearths not for warmth, but for comfort. Something was coming. Everyone felt it. Then, just after midnight, the dogs began to bark, one by one. First on the edge of the village, then nearer. Then a sudden silence, deeper than before. And then someone looked up. The moon hung low. Red, burning red. Not a soft glow this time. Not a haze, but full and round and glaring, like an open wound in the heavens. No one slept that night. They stood in their doorways, behind half-closed shutters, staring upward with wide eyes and crossed hearts. The bell at the church tower tolled once. Then again, no one had rung it. The priest swore it on his life. In the barn, a cow gave birth early to a calf with white eyes and a strange mark on its back. At the river, the water shimmered faintly red, and in the far hills, someone said they saw a fire moving across the ridgeline, but there was no smoke, no sound, just a glow, faint, pulsing, like breath. By morning, no one spoke of it directly, but the fear had changed shape. It wasn't just terror anymore. It was expectation. Like the villagers were no longer afraid of the blood moon returning, but of what it might be waiting for. In the days that followed, dreams became darker. One woman saw her dead husband sitting at the end of her bed, whispering in a language she didn't know. A child drew pictures in the dirt, strange shapes and circles, eyes without faces, roads leading off cliffs. And in the forest, the trees themselves began to seem wrong. Birdsong was rare. Moss grew too thick. A path that once led straight now curved in on itself. The healer's ashes had long since cooled, but no one dared walk past the ruins. Some said you could still hear whispering there if you passed at the wrong time. Others said the earth in that spot never dried, even in sun. One evening, as the village gathered in the church for evening prayers, a man stood and asked the question everyone else had been too afraid to speak aloud. "What if this isn't the end of something?" he said. "What if this is the beginning?" The room fell silent. Even the candles flickered. The priest opened his Bible, but his hands trembled. "The Lord said there would be signs," he whispered, "in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars." But he did not say when. That night, the blood moon returned for a third time. It rose earlier, brighter, and this time, the howling did not come from dogs. It came from the hills, and it did not sound human. The sound from the hills didn't fade. It lingered. A low, bone-deep howl, not sharp, not animal. It was round, hollow, like wind circling inside a cave, but layered, like many voices woven into one long, aching moan. Some said it was the earth itself crying out. Others closed their doors and prayed to forget. But forgetting is a mercy not given to the sleepless. The next morning, a boy was missing. Tomas, the miller's youngest, only 7. He'd been seen just before dusk, chasing a ball of twine near the old well. His mother turned her back for a moment, just long enough to feed the chickens. He never came back. They searched all day, into the night. No footprints, no broken branches, not even the twine. Only a patch of earth near the forest, pressed in the shape of a circle where nothing would grow. That was when the older folk began to speak again, of things once buried, things best left there. "The eclipse is one thing," said Marta, the oldest in the village, her hands gnarled like roots. "But the blood moon calls. It always has, and it always takes." People stopped calling her mad after that. They came to her in secret, asking what she remembered, what they should do. And she told them, voiced like dry leaves, there are old prayers. Not to God, to the ones older than him. At first, the priest tried to silence her. But after the third blood moon, even he stayed quiet. The truth is, when night is long enough, People will kneel to anything that promises morning. And so they listened. They brought herbs, ash, teeth of animals long dead. They lit fires not in hearths, but in circles. They carved sigils on doors, not for beauty, but protection. And in the middle of it all, someone watched. A man, tall, wrapped in a coat too heavy for spring. He'd come a month before, just before the first eclipse, saying little, paying in silver, renting the small room above the tavern. They called him Elias. No last name, no family. He listened more than he spoke. But when the moon turned red, he watched it with eyes that didn't blink. And when the boy went missing, he walked into the woods alone, with nothing but a lantern and a knife. He came back before dawn. The knife was clean. The lantern was not. He didn't speak, just went upstairs, locked his door, didn't come out for 2 days. But when he did, he looked straight at Marta and said one thing. It's not finished. That night, when the blood moon rose for the 4th time, the air felt heavier. Even the crows had left. Not a single sound echoed through the valley. Not owl, not breeze, not breath. The silence had become a second skin, stretched too tight over the bones of the village. And then, the dreams returned. Not gentle ones, not veiled in fog. These were sharp, cold, too real. People dreamed of standing beneath the red moon, unable to move, unable to scream, while something vast and black unfolded behind the horizon, its eyes endless, its mouth full of whispers that slid behind the ears and into the soul. In the dreams, they were being counted, one by one. Elias knew the signs. He'd seen them before, in a town further east, a forgotten place now, overgrown, hushed. It always began with the moon, then the missing, then the dreams. And then the opening. He didn't sleep anymore. He walked the forest edge at night, whispering words in an older tongue, tracing salt along stones and old trees. He didn't expect the girl. She couldn't have been more than 16. Quiet, barefoot, eyes wide as silver coins. She appeared beside him like a shadow that had been walking beside him all along. You're drawing the ward wrong, she said. He didn't speak, just looked at her. She knelt, corrected the shape with one finger in the dirt. Her hands shook. I see them too, she whispered. And in that moment, Elias knew. He wasn't the only one left who remembered. The blood moon pulsed overhead, and in the forest beyond them, something moved. Something big. Something that had been waiting. Part 3, The Forest Remembers. The forest had never been silent. Even in the dead of winter, the trees creaked. The owls called. The snow fell with a hush you could feel in your ribs. But tonight, it was mute. Not quiet. Mute. As if the entire woodland was listening and didn't want to interrupt. Elias walked first. The girl followed close behind, barefoot still, though he had offered his cloak. She refused with a look, half defiance, half fear. Like if she accepted warmth, something else would notice. The lantern swayed in his hand, casting pale yellow light on the moss-covered path. But the light didn't stretch far. It felt swallowed, chewed up by the dark between the trees. She spoke without turning her head. They don't like fire. He glanced at her. Who? She didn't answer. But she reached into the pouch tied at her waist and pulled out something wrapped in black cloth, unrolled it, carefully. A ring of teeth, strung on a leather cord. Some were human. Most weren't. My grandmother wore this when she walked the forest. Said it kept them from speaking directly into her. Elias looked at her again, truly looked. She wasn't 16, or 20. She was both. And neither. Her face was young, but her eyes held too many winters, too many moons. And the way the trees bent toward her, he noticed it now, as if they remembered her. They walked in silence until they reached the clearing. It was small, but the trees curved away from it, like something had pushed them back. In the center stood an old stone, rounded, cracked, and stained red with something long dried. The girl whispered, "This is where they came through the last time." Elias stepped forward slowly. His fingers brushed the stone. It was warm. Beneath it, the ground pulsed, ever so faintly. He knelt, pressing his ear to the soil. and he heard it. Not voices. Drumming. Distant. Faint. But steady. As if something on the other side of the earth was waking up and beating its way toward them. The girl stood at the edge of the clearing, staring up at the blood moon now high overhead. "They only need one thing," she said. "What's that?" Elias asked. She turned to him, and her voice was not her own. "For the door to be remembered." The clearing shifted. The trees groaned. Slow and deep like bones cracking. The stars above blinked out one by one. And from the edge of the clearing, something began to step forward. No footsteps. No breath. Just shape. Tall. Thin. Wrapped in skin like smoke. Eyes like dried blood. Elias stood quickly, drawing his knife, whispering under his breath. But the girl did not move. She stepped toward the shape and smiled. "They remember me," she said softly. "And I remember them." Elias didn't lower his blade. Not yet. The girl, no. The thing wearing the girl's skin walked slowly toward the shape that had entered the clearing. Her bare feet didn't make a sound. The ground didn't resist her. If anything, it seemed to breathe with each of her steps. Elias whispered an old name, a name he had not spoken since the monastery, a name meant to bind shadows. The shape paused, tilted its head, and laughed. It wasn't a sound meant for ears. It was dry leaves cracking beneath boots, bones popping out of joint, the hush before a scream. The girl turned her head slightly toward Elias, as if she'd heard a small joke. "You can't bind what was invited." Her voice was layered now, the tone of a child, the echo of an old woman, and beneath it, something hollow, like wind inside an empty chapel. "I didn't invite anything," Elias said. "I'm here to stop it." "No," she said, stepping toward the standing stone. "You're here because the forest never forgot you. And neither did I." The words sank in. Elias blinked. Once. Twice. And behind his eyes, memory. Not his own. A hand pressing a sigil into the bark of a young tree. A circle of blood. Warm on snow. A promise, made not with words, but with fear. "You were a child," he whispered. "You were the last offering." The girl smiled. "But I didn't die." Her hand pressed flat against the stone, and it began to glow, a dim, red heartbeat. Slow. Ancient. "They tried to sacrifice me. Your order. Your brothers. They thought the blood moon needed blood." Elias stepped back. The shape in the trees moved closer now, no longer a distant threat. It had taken form. Human-like, but not human. Draped in rags that shifted like wet ash. Its arms were too long. Its face, a blur of shadow. "They were wrong," she said. "It was never blood the moon asked for. It was memory." The trees around the clearing bent inward. The earth trembled softly, like it was remembering a sound it hadn't heard in centuries. Elias gritted his teeth. "Then what are you?" She turned to face him fully now. Not smiling. Not mocking. Just ancient. "I'm what happens when you leave a child with the forest and call it a sacrifice." A wind picked up. The shape moved to her side, and for a breathless second, it bowed. To her. And then, as she looked up at the moon, spoke one final sentence before the clearing cracked open beneath them. "Tonight, Elias, the forest remembers everything." The ground split. The trees howled. And the door opened. Part 4. The door that remembers you. The earth beneath Elias shattered like thin glass underfoot. A cold wind roared up from the crack, carrying voices, whispers and cries tangled with laughter, ancient as the stars themselves. Elias stumbled but caught himself on the jagged edge of the fissure. The world around him blurred and shifted. The forest disappeared. Gone. In its place stretched a vast chamber carved from living stone and bone. Walls breathed. Shadows twisted and danced without light. A crimson river flowed slow and thick through the floor, pulsing like a heartbeat. He stepped forward. The air tasted of iron and forgotten memories. Ahead, a towering arch loomed, etched with symbols that twisted and shifted. Sometimes letters, sometimes faces, sometimes screams. The arch was the door that remembered. Behind it, a darkness older than time waited. Elias felt it reach for him, not with hands, but with memories. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. A child laughing beneath the blood moon. Hands tying knots of blood-red thread. Faces of those lost, forgotten. Promises made in fear. The door whispered secrets only the lost could hear. He realized this place was alive, an echo chamber of the past, where every memory ever touched by the forest was stored, kept, and judged. Then came a voice. Soft. Female. Familiar. "You're here," she said, stepping from the shadows. The girl, or whatever she was, now fully herself, eyes glowing faintly. "This door is not just stone and blood. It is the memory of all who crossed its threshold. And now, it remembers you." Elias raised his knife, but she shook her head. Violence won't open the way. Only truth. He swallowed hard. What truth could he offer to a door that remembered centuries of pain, fear, and sacrifice? "Why am I here?" he whispered. "To choose," she said. "To remember and to decide what is forgotten." The door began to hum, low and deep, as the river's pulse grew faster. Elias took a step closer. The chamber shifted again. Faces, living and dead, appeared in the walls, watching, waiting. And in that moment, Elias understood. The eclipse and the blood moon were not curses. They were calls. Summons to remember the past so the future could be rewritten. The door opened wider, and Elias stepped into the dark. The darkness swallowed Elias whole. But it wasn't empty. Around him, shadows whispered, fragments of memory, echoes of long-lost voices. He reached out, fingers brushing phantom shapes, cold, fleeting, yet heavy with emotion. A child's laughter turned to sobs. A sword clashed against bone. A mother's prayer lost in the wind. Elias stumbled forward. Heart pounding, breath shallow. The girl's voice floated near, soft as a breeze yet sharp as a blade. "Every memory here is a thread," she said. "Together, they weave the truth. But beware, the past can be a cage as much as a key." Ahead, the crimson river split into countless streams, each glowing faintly, leading deeper into the labyrinth of remembrance. Elias chose a path. Suddenly, a figure appeared, a knight in cracked armor, face hidden beneath a shattered helm. "You've come far, but not far enough," the knight intoned. Voice hollow yet commanding. Elias steadied himself. "Who are you?" "A guardian of memories," the knight replied. "I watch over what was lost and what must not be forgotten." The river's pulse quickened. The walls shimmered, revealing scenes from centuries past. Villagers trembling under eclipsed skies, whispered tales of the blood moon's curse. Sacrifices made in desperate hope. Why did they fear the eclipse and the blood moon? Elias asked. The knight's voice softened. Because they knew what comes when the sky bleeds, when light dies and shadows feast. Not just death, but forgetting. The end of stories, the loss of souls. Elias clenched his fists. And what can be done? The knight raised a gauntlet hand. You must choose which memories live and which fade. To break the cycle, the door must open fully, and the past must be faced without fear. The girl stepped forward, eyes glowing brighter. Are you ready, Elias? To see what they tried to bury? To remember what the forest never forgot? He swallowed hard, then nodded. The river surged. The door's archway flared with light, and the journey deeper into the heart of the eclipse began. The moment Elias crossed the threshold, the world shifted again. Walls of stone melted into trees of bone, branches reaching like fingers toward a sky unseen. Time unraveled, spilling moments like water through cracked glass. Voices, some whispering warnings, others mourning, wove a tapestry of sound around him. He was no longer in the forest, nor fully in memory. He was somewhere between, suspended. Ahead, the crimson river forked into endless paths, each glowing faintly with its own pulse. The girl's eyes, no longer human, reflected all those paths at once. You stand at the crossroads of memory and fate, she said softly. Choose wisely, Elias. Every step binds you deeper, every choice rewrites what must be remembered or forgotten. Elias swallowed the rising fear. I came to end the fear, he said, to understand why the eclipse and blood moon haunt the past. She smiled, cold, knowing. They haunt because they are not just events in the sky. They are reminders. Suddenly, the river's current surged, pulling Elias toward a glowing path lined with faces, men, women, children, all frozen in silent screams or silent prayers. You will see their stories, she warned. Their truths. But beware, the past does not always forgive. Steeling himself, Elias stepped forward. The air grew thick with sorrow and regret. Memories unfurled like tattered banners. A village cloaked in darkness, flames licking the night, chants that begged the sky to stop bleeding. He saw the fear, raw and suffocating, that gripped the hearts of those who lived beneath the eclipsed sun and blood-red moon. But beneath the fear, something darker pulsed. A hunger. A price paid in silence and sacrifice. Elias's breath caught. This is what they feared most, he whispered. Not the darkness itself, but what it took from them. The girl's voice echoed. Both near and far. To face the eclipse is to face what lies hidden in the heart of the forest and in ourselves. The river's glow intensified, lighting a path forward into deeper shadows. Elias knew this was only the beginning. The door behind him whispered closed, and the forest waited. Part 5. Shadows of the Forgotten. The deeper Elias walked into the labyrinth of memories, the heavier the air grew, thick with dust, sorrow, and the weight of countless forgotten souls. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, slow and steady, guiding him through corridors lined with flickering visions. Faces appeared, frozen in moments of terror and hope, villagers clutching one another as the sky turned black, priests chanting desperate prayers, children staring wide-eyed at a blood-red moon. But it wasn't just fear they felt, it was betrayal. Elias reached out to touch one figure, a young woman kneeling in a pool of candlelight, her eyes hollow yet burning with defiance. A voice whispered through the chamber, low and trembling. They called it a curse, but it was a choice. The girl's voice, now softer, but no less intense, spoke beside him. The eclipse and the blood moon were signs not of doom, but of warning. The people feared the sky's bleeding because it revealed the darkness within their own hearts. Elias frowned. What darkness? The order you belong to, she said, her eyes glinting with ancient sorrow. They believed sacrifice could appease the celestial fury. They silenced voices, hid truths, and offered children, innocent and pure, as offerings. A vision erupted before Elias, monks in dark robes binding a struggling child, a ritual under the red moonlight, the air thick with chants and tears. But the forest, she continued, remembered. It kept the souls alive, not as victims, but as guardians of the truth. Elias's heart clenched. So, the eclipse wasn't evil? The blood moon isn't a curse. Not by themselves, she said. They're mirrors, reflecting human fear, cruelty, and hope. They ask, what will you remember? What will you forget? A sudden chill swept the chamber as shadows gathered. Swirling into shapes, specters of those lost to fear and silence. They reached out, not to harm, but to plead. To remember us, they whispered. To break the cycle. Elias looked at the girl. What must I do? She smiled, fragile but fierce. Face the past without blindness. Choose to carry memory, not as a burden, but as a beacon. Only then can the forest and the world heal. The crimson river before them pulsed brighter, inviting Elias onward. With a steady breath, Elias stepped forward, ready to embrace the shadows of the forgotten and rewrite the story of fear and light forever. The specters' whispers swirled around Elias like a chilling wind, their eyes pleading for remembrance. He felt their sorrow, their fear, and beneath it all, a desperate hope. Remembering is not easy, the girl's voice echoed, but forgetting is far worse. Elias's hand trembled as he reached toward the glowing crimson river. The water felt alive, thick and warm, pulsing with the heartbeat of countless souls. He dipped his fingers in. Visions exploded in his mind. Faces of children lost to fear, their laughter silenced. A village burned beneath a sky swallowed whole by darkness. Priests offering false hope through blood rituals. But also, acts of courage, silent rebellions, whispered prayers of mercy, the forest's ancient magic weaving protection. The river carried not just pain, but the strength to endure. Choose, Elias, the girl said. Which memories will you carry forward? Which will you leave to rest? He closed his eyes. He saw his own fear, his own doubts, and the faces of those who came before, trapped between light and shadow. In that moment, Elias understood. To break the curse of the eclipse and blood moon, he must embrace the whole truth, the darkness and the light. With steady breath, he spoke. I will remember everything. The pain, the sacrifice, the hope. The chamber trembled. The crimson river glowed brighter than ever, flooding the labyrinth with warm light. The specters smiled, their forms dissolving into shining motes of memory. The girl stepped aside, revealing the door beyond. It opens now, she whispered. Elias stepped forward, heart pounding, but free. The door swung wide. Beyond lay the forest, and beyond that, a new dawn waiting to be born. The door before Elias widened, spilling warm light into the cold labyrinth. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, with a deep exhale, Elias stepped through. The forest greeted him, not as a place of shadows and fear, but as a sanctuary reborn. The sky above no longer bled with ominous red, but shimmered in gentle hues of dawn. The ancient trees whispered songs of healing. The girl, now glowing softly, smiled. You have done what few dared, she said. You remembered. You carried the weight, and freed the souls trapped in fear. Elias looked back once, at the fading glow of the crimson river, and understood the truth carved into the very fabric of time. The eclipse and the blood moon were never curses themselves. They were reflections of humanity's deepest fears and hopes, reminders that memory shapes destiny. The villagers' terror was real, but it was also born from silence, secrets, and sacrifices hidden from light. By choosing to remember everything, Elias broke the cycle. The forest exhaled, and a new story began, one where fear no longer ruled, and where light and shadow danced in balance. Elias turned toward the rising sun, feeling its warmth fill his chest. The ancient fear of eclipse and blood moon had lost its power, not because it vanished, but because it was finally understood. And in that understanding lay freedom. The forest around him blossomed anew. Birdsong filled the air. The past was remembered. The future opened wide. Elias smiled, ready to walk forward, no longer afraid. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Elias stood silently, feeling the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. The shadows that once haunted him had softened, transformed by the light of understanding and remembrance. No longer a prisoner of fear, he was now a guardian of truth, of memories both painful and precious. He knew the eclipse and blood moon would rise again, as they always had, but their meaning had changed. They were no longer omens of doom, but symbols of the courage it takes to face darkness within and without. The forest whispered its gratitude, a gentle breeze carrying the voices of those long forgotten, finally at peace. Elias turned away from the ancient door, stepping back into the world renewed. With each step, he carried the stories of the past, not as burdens, but as lights to guide him and those who would come after. And as the sun rose higher, painting the sky in gold and rose, he smiled, knowing that fear had lost its hold. Because sometimes, the darkest nights give birth to the brightest dawns. In every shadow lies a story waiting to be told. Fear often grows from what we do not understand, and darkness can only hold power when we let it remain hidden. But when we face our fears, when we remember the past with open hearts, we break the chains that bind us. The eclipse and blood moon remind us that light and shadow coexist, each shaping the other. May we all find the courage to look beyond the darkness, to carry the truths of yesterday, and to walk boldly into the dawn of tomorrow. Because it is in remembering and in hope that we find freedom.